Hey guys, tonight we're cracking open a bottle of Victorian cheer. Spoiler alert, it smells like spoiled milk and regret. And diving headfirst into the brutal reality of New Year's celebrations in Victorian England. Not the fancy Downton Abbey version with polite clapping and chilled sherry. No, tonight we're taking you to the Soot Street streets, where the chimney sweep is drunk, your aunt is crying into a meat pie, and someone just tried to kiss you with a breath that could strip paint. So, before you get comfortable, go ahead and like this video and subscribe. But only if you actually enjoy this kind of thing. Leave a comment telling me what time it is where you're watching and whether or not you're wearing socks. I don't know why, but those two things seem spiritually connected at this hour. Now, dim the lights. Turn on a fan for that gentle Victorian ghost ambience, and maybe pull the blanket up to your chin just in case we talk about rats. Spoiler, we will. Let's get curious for a second. Have you ever wondered what it was like to ring in the new year without fireworks, countdowns, or existential dread about your 41,000? Have you ever toasted the new year with something called Wasel that may or may not contain raw egg and tree bark? Wondered how long you'd last dancing in a frosty alley with a coal-smeared stranger named Harold? Have you ever tried to write New Year's resolutions in a time where paper cost more than your cousin's funeral? And now, congratulations. You've just woken up in the winter of 1852. It's New Year's Eve in Victorian England. You're broke, wearing your cousin's coat, and you're about to be kissed by someone named Maud who thinks dental care is a French myth. Good luck. It's New Year's Eve, and your home is so cold your soul has frostbite. Victorian insulation is a myth. Your fireplace coughs more than your uncle, and your breath is visible inside the house. You're wrapped in a moth-eaten shawl, drinking something called hot beef tea, which is exactly as depressing as it sounds. The walls are supposed to be made of brick, but let's be honest, these bricks were likely held together by hope and expired porridge. The windows rattle like a séance is happening in the next room. You've stuffed the gaps with bits of cloth, old newspapers, and something that may have once been a sock, but the wind doesn't care. It slinks in like a petty thief and settles into your spine. The Victorian cold isn't just a temperature, it's a presence. A smug, freezing roommate that doesn't pay rent and always wants to borrow your blanket. Your bed is made of wood and regret. The mattress, if you can call it that, is a sack stuffed with straw that's poking through like it wants to escape this life as badly as you do. The blanket is a family heirloom in the sense that everyone's inherited its itch. You consider huddling next to the hearth. But the fire gave up 2 hours ago. It left a note that said, "Good luck, idiot," and went to haunt someone else's chimney. You try to warm your hands on your mug of hot beef tea. It smells like someone wrung out a meatloaf and charged you for it. It tastes like salt, bones, and existential doubt, but it's hot technically, and that's enough. You sip it slowly, imagining it filling your body with warmth, but it mostly just makes your stomach feel like you've swallowed disappointment. Every joint in your body has filed a complaint. Your knees crack when you shift in your chair. Your fingers are too stiff to write your New Year's resolutions, which is convenient because you weren't going to keep them anyway. You pull your shawl tighter, but it's mostly holes now. One of them might be growing. You swear you saw it blink. Outside, the streets are glazed with a thin layer of frost and despair. The cobblestones are slick and treacherous, like a frozen meat pie tray waiting to ruin your hip. Somewhere, a child screams, possibly with joy. Possibly because he stepped in something that used to be warm. It's hard to tell. The Victorian soundtrack is mostly coughing and crying, punctuated by distant bells and the occasional horse-related disaster. Inside, your breath clouds in the air like a haunted cartoon. You move closer to the window and scratch a peephole into the frost with your thumbnail. On the other side is the world, grim, grey, and bustling with people who are somehow even colder than you. A woman passes by holding a wrapped bundle that might be a baby or just some old fish. Someone else slips on the ice, curses, then tips their hat to a passerby like it was all part of the plan. You admire the resilience. And also the hat. This is New Year's Eve in Victorian England. Not glamorous, not glittering, just aggressively freezing and slightly soggy. You shiver so hard your teeth clatter Morse code for send help. You don't dare take off your boots, not because they're warm, but because they're frozen on. You're not wearing socks. No one is. Socks are a luxury reserved for people with fewer siblings and more stable chimney systems. Eventually, you stop trying to fight the cold. You let it in. You become one with the chill. The cold isn't just around you, it is you. You are cold. You are a draft with opinions. You are the personification of winter. And as the wind whistles through the cracks in the door, and someone upstairs drops a chamber pot with a splash and a curse, you whisper to yourself, "Happy New Year. Please don't die tonight." And then, as your eyes flutter closed, you dream of fire. Or maybe that's just the rat nest in the wall catching light. Either way, it's warm. Getting dressed feels like wrapping a corpse in increasingly sad fabrics. Wool, linen, leather, more wool. It's all itchy, damp, and smells faintly of onions. Your boots are made of sorrow and cardboard. But at least you're not barefoot, unlike your cousin Billy, who claims it makes him closer to the earth. Billy also believes wearing shoes blocks your spiritual connection to chimney soot, but that's not the point. The point is, Victorian winter fashion isn't about looking good. It's about not dying, and even that feels optional at times. Your first layer is linen, thin, cold, and about as comforting as wrapping yourself in antique sandwich paper. Over that comes a woolen undershirt, which is scratchier than your aunt's mood after communion wine. You'd love to wear clean undergarments, but it's January, and your laundry water currently exists in its solid state. Then come the trousers, made of thick, heavy cloth, dyed the color of industrial sadness. There's a button missing, possibly several. You hold them up with a length of string you found tied to last year's birthday pudding. It's less fashion and more gravity negotiation. Next, you add a vest, or what was once a vest and now resembles a shrunken horse blanket. It doesn't button anymore, but you wear it out of principle and body shame. You consider adding a scarf, but the family scarf has been missing since Michaelmas and may be in use as a curtain at your neighbor's house. You settle for wrapping your neck in what might be an old sock. It smells like boiled potatoes and abandonment. Your coat is made of wool that has absorbed 30 years of suffering. It has shoulder pads made of straw, not by design but by accident. The lining is gone. It gave up. Some say it fled to a better coat. You pull it on anyway. The cold doesn't stay out. It just gets filtered through damp tweed before settling into your joints like unpaid rent. Then the gloves. Technically, they're not gloves. They're fingerless mitts made from a cut-up potato sack and loosely resewn with what you think is cat hair. They provide all the insulation of a gentle thought. Your fingers poke out like tiny icicle sausages, trembling with indignation and early-stage frostbite. The shoes are special. Victorian winter shoes are less shoes and more extremely wet ideas. The leather cracks audibly when you bend your foot. You've stuffed them with newsprint, sawdust, and one of your hopes. The sole flaps open when you walk, making a sound like a duck stepping on a squeaky toy. But at least you have them. Billy's feet look like two tragic potatoes taped to the bottom of his legs. Once fully dressed, you attempt movement. It's not so much walking as lurching forward with the momentum of damp fabric. You can no longer bend your arms properly. Sitting is ambitious. You are now a wearable stack of mouldy quilts that can vaguely nod. And yet, this is considered standard. No one expects better. Because no one has better. You pass 10 people in the street and can't tell who's freezing, who's asleep, and who's just emotionally done. Every person is bundled like a lost laundry pile with anxiety. There's no room for elegance. No one says, "Ooh, is that velvet?" because they know it's probably potato sack dyed with coal water. The closest thing to style is not having visible lice. Victorian winter fashion doesn't flatter the body. It reminds the body that it lives in constant, soggy fear. You don't feel warm, you feel trapped, but you're still upright, still breathing cold, coal-flavored air. And in 1852, that's fashion. That's survival. That's enough. The sun rises at 11 a.m., but never commits. The street is misty, the air tastes like chimney, and the local drunk is already asleep on a stoop. You greet the new day with tea, stale bread, and a vague sense that you may or may not have debt collectors coming by. You take a sip of your tea. It's weak, lukewarm, and made from leaves that have already been used 3 times this week. You pretend it's comforting. In reality, it tastes like boiled grass and disappointment. Your bread, meanwhile, is so stale it could double as roofing material. You chew slowly, trying to convince your jaw that this is food and not some kind of cruel prank. It squeaks like furniture as you bite down. Your stomach groans in protest, but you ignore it. There's work to be done. Maybe. You're not exactly sure what day it is. Technically, it's December 31st. But your perception of time has been dulled by a combination of fog, hunger, and the emotional weight of winter. Every day feels like a Tuesday that forgot to shower. Outside, the streets are a mess of churned-up mud, horse droppings, and melting frost. The cobblestones are slick with a film of ice, and something unidentifiable that's either ale or something that once lived. You step out gingerly, boots squelching with every footfall. You nearly slip, steady yourself on a passing stranger, and get a grunt of watch it and the faint smell of turnips in return. The fog is thick, Victorian thick, industrial thick. It doesn't gently waft. It sits on your chest like an anxious cat, pressing into your lungs with every breath. You cough. Everyone coughs. Somewhere in the distance, a bell chimes. You have no idea what it's announcing. It could be church, it could be a funeral, or it could just be the town crier knocking over another barrel. The local drunk, Harold, is slumped in his usual spot, on the stoop of the greengrocer's, legs akimbo, snoring softly into his scarf. At least, you think it's Harold. It might be the baker, or your landlord. Most men in Victorian England wear the same 3 coats and share a communal beard aesthetic. You nod respectfully as you pass, the Victorian version of saying good morning without having to actually expend the energy. Social interaction before noon is frowned upon anyway, unless you're bartering for coal or offering someone a boiled egg in exchange for not stealing your shovel. Children run past, already screaming. They're not fighting, they're just celebrating. Possibly. It's hard to tell. One of them is wearing a hat that might be a dead pigeon. Another is waving a stick and shouting about the end of the year. You pretend not to hear them. If you make eye contact, they'll follow you. You shuffle along toward the market, hoping to find something vaguely edible that hasn't been sneezed on. The stalls are half empty. The fishmonger is yelling about fresh eel. The eel is not fresh. It's not even conscious. One of the vegetables has a mustache. You consider buying it anyway, out of pity and a vague sense of kinship. Everywhere you turn, people are either preparing for the evening's celebration or just trying to stay upright in the slush. There's a buzz in the air, a quiet dread, really, that tonight might be festive or might just be an excuse for the local chimney sweep to start singing again. You duck back into your home, bread slightly damper than before, and sit by the cold hearth, chewing slowly. The mist clings to your coat like guilt. You stare into the grey light filtering through the window and wonder what the new year will bring. More fog? New debts? Fewer teeth? Probably all three. But for now, you've made it through the morning. Mostly upright, only mildly damp, and still owed rent by 3 different cousins. In Victorian England, that's about as good as it gets. Time to celebrate with Wasel, the Victorian version of eggnog. Except it's chunky, hot, and may contain small bits of firewood. It's sweet, sour, spiced, and brewed in a bucket someone once used to store nails. Everyone drinks it. Everyone regrets it. Wasel, from the Old English Wasel, meaning be in good health, is one of those things that sounds lovely in theory, like a hug in a mug. In practice, however, it's a warm swamp of dubious origin. The recipe is less a list of ingredients and more of a dare. Apples, ale, sugar, cinnamon, nutmeg, cloves, and sometimes eggs. Sometimes cream. Occasionally meat, because nothing welcomes the new year like a warm beverage that doubles as stew. It's ladled out from a pot that's older than your aunt and has the patina to prove it. The surface of the wassail glistens with a suspicious film, like it's trying to develop a second skin. The aroma hits your nose before the cup hits your hand, sharp, spicy, and unmistakably yeasty, with undertones of mouldy cider and candle smoke. A Victorian sommelier would describe it as boldly medicinal, with notes of apple rot and faint sadness. Everyone's cup looks slightly different. Yours has a cinnamon stick. Billy's has half a raisin and a splinter. Uncle Thaddeus found a button in his. You drink it anyway, because refusing it is a direct insult to the host, and in Victorian England, that sort of offence could spark a 3-generation blood feud or get you kicked out into the snow. The first sip is always a shock. It's hot, too hot. You burn your tongue and then proceed to sip it too quickly, just to get it over with. The texture is wrong. It's thick but not creamy, somehow both gritty and slimy, like mulled cider that's been left under a bed for a week. You wince politely. Someone yells, "Wassail!" and you're required to yell it back while pretending you're not already nauseous. Some houses carry out wassailing traditions, which means singing carols door to door and demanding alcohol in return. You join a group, because why not? You're already slightly drunk and can no longer feel your feet. You traipse through the mud with neighbours you barely tolerate, stopping at each door to belt out a barely remembered folk song in 4 competing keys. If the homeowner is generous, they reward you with more wassail or a chunk of fruitcake that doubles as a building material. If they're stingy, they receive a threatening verse about crop failure or mouldy turnips. It's a charming tradition, steeped in festivity and mild social extortion. There's also apple tree wassailing, which involves pouring wassail on tree roots and hanging toast in branches to ensure a good harvest. It's like a pagan brunch offering. No one knows if it works, but it does confuse the birds. And confusion, in this context, is as good as magic. Back at the party, the wassail bowl circulates again. Someone has added more rum. Someone else has dropped in a bit of sausage for depth. You're too far gone to care. Your cheeks are flushed, your stomach is gurgling ominously, and you've just declared your love for the coal merchant's daughter while standing on a side table. The night wears on. The wassail keeps flowing, and so does the communal oversharing. You learn things about your neighbours you can't unlearn. Harold weeps quietly about a goose he once loved. Margaret reveals she's been wearing the same corset since 1839. Eventually, the bowl is empty. The regrets begin. You sit in the corner, holding your cup, wondering if what you're feeling is joy or just early-stage food poisoning. Probably both. Wassail, the Victorian beverage that warms your heart, scalds your tongue, and ruins your dignity in under an hour. Happy New Year. Drink responsibly. or don't. It's already too late. Welcome to First Footing, a tradition where the first visitor of the year decides your fate. People bribe tall, dark-haired men to walk through their doors. You get Harold from the pub. He's bald, sticky, and smells like fermented oats. Happy New Year. First Footing is one of those charming Victorian traditions that sounds simple enough. The first person to cross your threshold after midnight determines the luck of your entire year. Ideally, this person is a tall, dark-haired man bearing symbolic gifts: a coin, a lump of coal, a dram of whiskey. It's meant to represent prosperity, warmth, and inebriation, but in practice, it's mostly panic, bad timing, and Harold. You didn't plan for Harold. You were hoping for the blacksmith's apprentice, a strapping fellow with a full head of hair and the decency to wipe his boots. But the moment the church bells rang 12, Harold stumbled in, reeking of regret and rum punch, clutching what may or may not be a dead squirrel. "Wasel!" he cries, tripping over your doorstep and crashing into your grandmother's chair, which hasn't supported weight since the Corn Laws were repealed. He rises slowly, wiping mud from his cheek with a sock that doesn't appear to be his. The room goes silent. This is not how you wanted your year to start. Tradition dictates that first footers should bring a few tokens with them. Symbols of luck, health, and wealth. Harold brings none. He does, however, attempt to sing God Rest Ye Merry. Gentleman in a haunting minor key that causes the cat to flee. Someone hands him a crust of bread to shut him up. He uses it as a hat. The problem is, once someone's crossed the threshold, it's official. You can't undo it. You can't shove them back out and try again. Well, you can. But it's frowned upon and often ends in a fight involving frozen poultry. So you smile politely, offer him a mug of cold wassail, and silently curse the forces that allowed this to happen. Other households fare better. You watch from your frosted window as Mrs. Appleby across the lane opens her door to exactly the sort of man the legends describe: tall, mysterious, hair like a raven's wing, and carrying a bottle of sherry. She beams. Her year will be filled with successful stews and no dead mice in the flour. You stare down at Harold, who has now removed one shoe and is massaging his foot with molasses. You sigh deeply into your shawl. Still, you're obligated to treat your first footer with respect. You offer him a slice of fruit cake, so dense it could be used as a counterweight in a clock tower. He accepts it eagerly, chomps twice, and falls asleep mid-chew. You gently nudge him into a corner and drape a blanket over him. Maybe if you ignore him, the bad luck will just simmer quietly in that spot. There are superstitions, too. A red-haired woman is said to bring terrible luck. A fair-haired woman is only marginally better. A child brings mischief, a priest brings judgment, and a chimney sweep brings soot into your hall and an invoice 3 days later. Essentially, your best bet is a complete stranger who looks like he might be able to lift a bale of hay and isn't already married to your cousin. But you don't get your best bet, you get Harold. And Harold has now begun snoring in iambic pentameter, so you make peace with it. This is Victorian England. Bad luck is sort of the default setting anyway. Maybe Harold's presence will balance out the rats in the pantry and the roof that leaks only on your side of the bed. As the candles burn low and the air grows colder, you raise a cup of lukewarm tea and whisper to yourself, "Cheers to another year." Then you trip over Harold on your way to the chamber pot. This is how it begins. Not with a bang, but with a thud and a slightly sticky man named Harold. Resolutions are a thing now. You vow to stop swearing, quit gin, and find love. By January 2nd, you're cursing in public, holding a half-empty bottle and avoiding eye contact with Maud, the coal seller's daughter. Progress. It's the Victorian era. and self-improvement is in fashion, at least on paper. Literally. You've written your resolutions on a torn scrap of parchment that previously housed a shopping list and a suspicious stain. Writing them out is supposed to help you visualize your future. So far, the future looks damp and smells faintly of pickled eggs. You sit down by the fire, or rather, the place where a fire might one day exist if the coal arrives, and draft your list. You chew the end of your pencil, trying to channel your highest aspirations. The paper trembles in your chilled fingers as you scrawl the first lie. Drink less gin. You pause, squint at it, then add except Sundays in smaller writing. Sundays are sacred and long. Next comes, be kinder to others. A noble goal, until you realize this includes the people who elbow you at the butcher's and the children who pelt your window with turnip peelings. You leave it on the list, but add a footnote. Unless provoked. Provocation includes eye contact and loud breathing. Learn to read better is added optimistically, even though books cost more than shoes and you're still working through a pamphlet about chimney safety that you've been mispronouncing for 6 months. You underline it twice for emphasis. That's how you know it's serious. Then there's find love, a romantic idea. In theory. In practice, the dating pool consists of people you're probably related to. Men who think bathing causes brain rot. And Maud, who once offered you a pickled onion as a gesture of affection and still haunts your dreams. But you write it down anyway. Because New Year's is about hope, delusion, and publicly committing to personal growth, you have no intention of following through with. You're not alone in this ritual. Your neighbor, Mr. Timmons, has resolved to walk more, despite having one leg and a deep-seated hatred of exercise. Your cousin Edna has vowed to marry rich, which would be inspiring if she weren't currently engaged to a man who lists owns a spoon under his assets. Even Harold, the local drunk and part-time poet, has sworn off public urination, though to be fair, his resolution was shouted from the pub roof while clutching a flaming sausage. There's something comforting about the shared delusion. Everyone makes grand declarations. Everyone believes, for about 24 hours, that this year will be different. That this year they will change. Become better. Eat fewer questionable meats. Stop yelling at clouds. But change is hard in a world where meat comes wrapped in newspaper, soap is optional, and your landlord accepts payments in buttons. You wake up on January 1st with a mild hangover, frost in your socks, and a lingering sense of optimism. By January 3rd, the optimism has been replaced with a vague rash and the realization that gin is medicinal, technically. Still, you keep the parchment. You fold it neatly and tuck it behind the cracked mirror, next to your emergency beet ration. You tell yourself that next week you'll revisit it. Adjust your goals. Maybe make them more realistic. Like swear more quietly, or fall in love with someone who has access to indoor plumbing. And maybe, just maybe, you'll surprise yourself. You'll drink one less cup of gin. You'll learn a new word. You'll not scream at Maud when she throws coal at your front door. Small victories. Because that's what resolutions are really about. Pretending, for a moment, that life isn't a parade of cold mornings, lukewarm puddings, and neighborly judgment. It's hope, scribbled on parchment. And hope, in Victorian England, is worth exactly as much as coal, priceless when you have it, miserable when you don't. Midnight is marked not by fireworks, but by church bells that sound like they're tolling for your sins. You pause, look up at the starless sky, and wonder if this year will be the one where you stop sneezing ash. There's something profoundly unsettling about 12 loud chimes echoing through the Victorian fog, each one slower and more judgmental than the last. No countdown, no cheering, no glass of Prosecco in hand. Just a deep resonant bong that feels less like celebration and more like the universe clearing its throat before something terrible happens. You stand outside your door, bundled in 17 layers of wool and mild anxiety, surrounded by neighbors doing the same thing. Most are silent. A few are muttering prayers. One man is sobbing into a cabbage. This is the most social interaction anyone's had all week. The sky is the color of despair soup. A few snowflakes drift down, but they're dirty, like they passed through a chimney on the way here. The wind whistles through the alley in that very specific key of haunted orphanage. And yet, this is considered festive. You glance down the street to see Mrs. Weller lighting a candle in her window. She does it every year, supposedly to ward off ghosts, bad omens, and her sister-in-law. Across from her, someone lets out a cheer too early and is immediately hushed by a stern man in a mutton-chop beard who whispers, "Not yet. The bell hasn't finished." You nod. You understand. It's tradition. You're meant to reflect now. To think back on the year you just survived, and look ahead to the one creeping around the corner, like a raccoon with a grudge. You try to reflect, but all you can remember from the past 12 months is being cold, occasionally wet, and once mildly electrocuted by a faulty lamp oil incident. Honestly, not bad by Victorian standards. Bell number 7 rings. You flinch involuntarily. It reminds you of a funeral. It is a funeral, in a way, a burial of yet another year in which your most significant accomplishment was not marrying the neighbor who eats soup with his hands. By the 10th bell, someone in the crowd sneezes violently. A chain reaction begins. 10 people sneeze. One woman coughs so hard she drops her cat. The cat flees. Everyone pretends it didn't happen. It's easier that way, and then the final bell tolls. A low, slow reverberation that rolls through your chest like a judgmental god saying, "Good luck, you'll need it." You wait for something, anything to follow. A cheer, a song, a parade of enthusiasm. But there's only silence. Deep, awkward, Victorian silence. A shared moment of dread that wraps around everyone like a damp scarf of existentialism. Eventually, someone claps. A single, hopeful clap. Then another. Then half-hearted cheers begin to sputter out like wet fireworks. A woman yells, "Happy New Year!" and is immediately corrected by a man with an almanac who insists it's not technically the new year until the sun rises. Everyone rolls their eyes and goes back to sipping lukewarm punch. You turn and shuffle back inside. The fire has mostly gone out. Your tea has gone cold. Your cousin has fallen asleep with his hand in the pickled beet jar. You step over him, wrap yourself tighter in your blanket, and sit down in the gloom. Is this the start of something new? Maybe. Is it just another day in Victorian England? Almost certainly, but for now, the bells have stopped. The worst is behind you. Probably. You made it to the new year, and in 1852, that counts as a win. It's the Victorian tradition to kiss someone at midnight. You pucker up and are met by Cousin Ellen, who just ate pickled herring and believes toothpaste is for aristocrats. Your year has begun with trauma. The logic behind the tradition is simple. Share a kiss at the stroke of midnight to ensure affection and good luck in the coming year. A lovely sentiment in theory. In Victorian England, however, it's less romantic and more survival-based, like marking territory at a family gathering to ensure no one marries your intended out from under you. You weren't aiming for Cousin Ellen. In fact, you were deliberately avoiding Cousin Ellen, but just as you turned to greet a friendly-looking woman near the wassail bowl, Ellen lunged, her shawl flapping like bat wings, and sealed your fate. Her lips smacked into yours with the precision of a homing pigeon trained on fear. The taste of vinegar, salted fish, and mild regret floods your senses. Your eyes water. You see God briefly. He looks concerned. You pull away politely, trying to maintain composure. She smiles, revealing teeth that look like they've seen battle. "Happy New Year," she whispers, breath humid with preserved onions and ancestral secrets. You nod, too stunned to speak, and begin scanning the room for bleach or a small fire to crawl into. You are not alone. Around the room, other midnight kisses are unfolding, none of them going well. Mr. Appleby and Mrs. Thistle just headbutted each other, trying to aim properly. Someone in the corner mistook a coat rack for their husband and kissed it with genuine tenderness. A pair of star-crossed teenagers locked lips and were immediately separated by a chaperone wielding a ladle. The concept of personal hygiene in 1852 is loose. Toothpaste exists, but only if you're rich, bored, or French. The rest rely on brushing with crushed charcoal or chewing parsley, which, let's be honest, is just flavoring the decay. You consider flossing with twine once, but it dislodged something that may have been part of your structural integrity. There's a bowl of mints on the table, but they're made from licorice and chalk, and someone has dropped half of them into a bowl of lard. You pop one in anyway, hoping for redemption. It dissolves instantly into a paste that glues your tongue to the roof of your mouth. You nod politely at people while internally screaming. As the kissing continues, the air becomes dense. It's humid, but not in a tropical way, more like a greenhouse for halitosis. Every breath carries notes of brandy, pickled meat, and gingivitis. You open a window, which is promptly closed by someone's aunt, who claims drafts cause hysteria. You begin to feel faint. Some families have assigned kissers. Pairings decided in advance to avoid awkwardness. Yours does not. Yours believes in spontaneity and the occasional accidental engagement. Kisses are exchanged between neighbors, cousins, total strangers, and at least one chimney sweep who might actually be a hallucination. You see Harold in the corner, attempting to kiss his own reflection in a silver tray. You choose not to intervene. And yet, despite the mouth trauma and the threat of oral typhoid, people smile. There's laughter. There's relief. You've made it to midnight. You've made it to the kiss. However sloppy or borderline criminal it may have been, it's a rite of passage, a way of saying, we're still here, and apparently, we're still very moist. You wipe your mouth with a doily and pour yourself a strong drink. The trauma will fade. The taste, hopefully, will not become permanent. You vow to bring cloves next year, or perhaps a mint cannon, because in Victorian England, kissing at midnight isn't about romance. It's about optimism, bold, slightly unsanitary optimism, and maybe, just maybe, that's enough to carry you into the next miserable, coal-dusted day. Children are released into the streets with rattles, tin pans, and terrifying energy. They bang on doors, shout incomprehensible blessings, and beg for coins. It's unclear if they're celebrating or starting a minor uprising. This isn't some quaint Victorian reenactment of innocence. No, this is real, unfiltered, sugar-fueled mayhem, wearing mittens and a bonnet. The adults, mostly exhausted, look the other way. They've accepted that between the hours of midnight and sunrise on New Year's, the children become a lawless, tinsel-wielding militia, with no rules, no curfew, and no concern for property damage. You've barely had time to finish your watery wassail before the banging begins. Your door rattles like it owes money. Before you can respond, it bursts open, because locks are optional in this economy, and 5 children rush in like tax auditors with wooden spoons. One throws glitter. Another shouts, "Bless this soupy house," while rattling a tambourine made from biscuit tins and string. You try to offer them something, anything, to make it stop. A penny? They scoff. Bread? Old news. Someone asks for boiled sweets or a legally binding wish. You give them half a turnip and a sincere apology. They nod solemnly, then charge the next house. This, they say, is tradition. A custom meant to bring luck. But luck, in this case, seems directly proportional to volume. The louder they are, the better the crops. That's the logic anyway. You suspect it's just an excuse for chaos. The rattles are improvised from whatever makes noise. Rocks in a sock, forks tied to a shoe. One child has a bell affixed to the tail of a terrified kitten. No one questions it. There's no adult supervision. Just one older sibling in a coat, too big, yelling "next house," like a very small general of mischief. They chant things that sound like ancient spells, but are probably just poorly remembered folk rhymes. One for the door, one for the floor. Give us a coin, or we'll ask for more. A child jumps out from behind a barrel and tries to hug your knees. Another one demands to know if you've made your resolutions. When you say yes, he throws a potato in the air and declares your wish granted. It hits the ground and rolls away. No one picks it up. The potato is now sacred. You see them ambush Mr. Plymley down the street. He offers a hard candy from 1843. They accept it with such theatrical glee you almost applaud. Then they begin following him home, chanting, "Thank you for your generosity, sweet candy man," until he gives them the other 2 pieces in his coat. Somewhere, a saucepan is being struck with the force of divine retribution. The clanging reverberates off the walls like an alarm clock for ghosts. A baby joins in with rhythmic screaming. You swear you see a goose wearing a scarf. And still, the children march on, door to door, shouting improvised blessings, demanding snacks, and possibly casting curses. One insists he can predict the future, then tells you that you will marry someone who smells of mint and coal. You thank him and hand over a biscuit, which he places in his hat without blinking. Eventually, the sugar wears off. They begin to collapse in puddles of cloaks and crumbs. Some curl up next to front steps like spent bottle rockets. Others crawl home under the cover of fog. One lies perfectly still, clutching a spoon, whispering victory. You step outside into the silence that follows, the eerie, post-chaos calm. The street is littered with feathers, footprints, and one mitten nailed to a fence like a warning. It's over, for now. And though your ears are ringing and your pantry is empty, you can't help but smile. It's tradition. It's loud. It's deeply unsettling, but it's theirs. And somehow, you wouldn't want it any other way. The food is a choice. There's figgy pudding, which is more bread than fig, mince pies with mystery meat, and something called mock turtle soup that tastes like anxiety. You chew slowly and hope for survival. Victorian New Year's cuisine isn't about pleasure, it's about endurance. Midnight marks the start of not just a new calendar year, but a late-night buffet of deeply confusing, frequently gelatinous celebratory foods. Nothing is quite what it seems. Everything is warm in the wrong way, and nearly every dish has either raisins or regret in it. You start with the figgy pudding, a staple of the season. You're excited briefly. You like figs, you enjoy pudding. But this? This is a steamed brick of flour, fat, and desperation, more closely related to a cannonball than dessert. It's been boiled in a cloth for 6 hours and aged in someone's cupboard for 6 weeks. You cut into it, and it exhales steam like an old dog. The texture is best described as wet loaf. You find a coin inside and try to feel lucky instead of alarmed. Next come the mince pies. Historically, these used to contain actual minced meat. Today, they still might. You're not sure. The filling is dark, sweet, and slightly spiced. But there's something chewy that might be raisin, lamb, or something in between. You bite down and make accidental eye contact with the person who baked them. You nod, smile, and chew in silence while mentally drafting your will. Someone passes you a bowl of mock turtle soup, which is, famously, not turtle, that's the mock part. Instead, it's made from boiled calf's head, seasoned until it's just barely edible, and thickened into something resembling chunky tea. It smells like defeat. You sip it carefully, trying not to gag. A lump hits your tongue. You don't investigate. There are also jellied things. You're never quite sure what they are. Some are meat-based. Others are vegetable-adjacent. One seems to contain bits of tongue, which you politely push to the side of your plate and cover with a decorative sprig of parsley that's seen better centuries. Dessert, you're told, is trifle. That sounds promising until you see it. It's been assembled in layers of sponge cake, custard, jam, and what may be sherry, all topped with a thin skin of cream that jiggles ominously. You take a bite and are immediately uncertain whether it's delicious or deeply unsettling. It tastes like memories you're not ready to confront. Off to the side, there's a platter of cheese, most of which seems to have matured into sentience. One wedge winks at you. You blink back and move on. You wash everything down with lukewarm punch, the Victorian answer to hydration. It's fruit, spices, wine, maybe a splash of ale, and just enough citrus to technically classify it as medicinal. It burns going down and leaves a slick film on your teeth. You feel vaguely cured and mildly flammable. The host brings out a large pie as the grand finale. It's shaped like a crown, baked until the crust resembles armor, and filled with assorted meats you're encouraged not to ask questions about. As the pie is sliced, the room holds its breath. Will it contain pigeon, rabbit, eel? It's eel. You nod solemnly and take your portion like a soldier. You chew slowly, carefully, respectfully. This is tradition. This is festivity. This is an obstacle course of flavors. Around you, others do the same. Cousin Edna asks if her pudding has bones in it. Someone finds a whole clove and bites down with the force of history. A child begins crying because the soup touched their bread. You sip more punch and close your eyes. If you survive the next 10 minutes, you'll have made it through another Victorian midnight meal. And in this era, that's not just a celebration, that's a triumph. After dinner comes dancing. The furniture is pushed aside. Someone cranks a hand organ, and off you go. It's less waltz and more flailing in wool. By the third dance, you're questioning your life choices and the smell of everyone present. Dancing in Victorian England is a full-contact sport disguised as a social grace. You're packed into a parlor the size of a modest broom closet with 15 other people, 3 confused pets, and at least one chair that will not survive the night. The piano is out of tune. The hand organ wheezes like an asthmatic donkey. Someone's uncle has brought a fiddle that may or may not have been cursed. It begins, as all disasters do, with optimism, a cheerful quadrille. You take your place awkwardly opposite a person you don't recognize. Could be a neighbor, could be your second cousin, could be both. And try to remember the steps. There are instructions being shouted over the music, but they're in thick dialect and possibly also code. You twirl when you should have stepped. You step when you should have bowed. You accidentally lock arms with the minister's wife and swing her directly into the sideboard. Lovely footwork. Someone lies. The air grows warm, not cozy firelight warm. No, wool ballroom warm, which is a very specific and deeply unpleasant temperature where everyone begins to sweat, but no one will admit it. You wipe your forehead with a handkerchief that immediately turns into a damp rag of despair. Your boots stick to the floor. You're not sure if it's spilled punch or a general sense of mildew. Someone starts a poker. This is a mistake. The polka involves jumping, spinning, and pretending you have both knees and dreams. You've already eaten 3 servings of eel pie, and your stomach is beginning to protest. Your partner, a well-meaning man with 2 left feet and the enthusiasm of a caffeinated goat, swings you so hard you hit the wall and bounce. Applause. You bow instinctively, then fall. By this point, the room has reached peak humidity. The windows have fogged. The candles are melting sideways. You suspect the wallpaper is beginning to peel out of sympathy. A child has passed out on the piano bench, face first into a plate of goose fat. No one notices. Everyone is too busy, attempting to mazurka in boots designed for suffering. The music continues. You suspect it may never stop. The fiddler has entered a trance-like state. The hand organ is smoking. Someone begins clapping in time, then out of time, then just clapping at random. The rhythm collapses, but the dancing continues. It cannot be stopped. You are all prisoners of tradition and inertia. By the 6th dance, you've lost feeling in your lower half and have started hallucinating your great aunt as a chandelier. She twirls beautifully. You've also stepped on several toes, apologized to the dog twice, and knocked over an entire coat rack while attempting a graceful spin. Your shirt is plastered to your back. Your cravat has loosened to the point of becoming a choking hazard. Your fellow dancers smell like boiled wool, hair oil, and unspoken grievances, and still, the music plays. Eventually, the furniture is no longer so much pushed aside as collapsed in protest. The hostess faints politely onto a footstool. The fiddler drops his bow with a final, tragic twang. A man coughs so hard he dislocates something, and a cat yowls from under the chaise lounge like it's singing for mercy. You limp back to your seat, well, to a box that used to be part of a chair, and mop your brow with a curtain. Someone hands you a lukewarm glass of sherry and tells you that dancing is good for circulation. You smile and nod, hoping no one notices the bead of sweat sliding into your ear canal. And so ends the dancing, not with grace or dignity or romance, but with splinters, dizziness, and a full-body sheen of regret. A perfect Victorian evening. Nothing ruins a party like an infectious disease. Someone starts coughing in the corner. You ignore it. Victorian denial is strong, and frankly, it's rude to die before dessert. This, after all, is New Year's Eve, and there's a certain social contract at play. Pretend everything is fine until someone collapses. Even then, it's customary to wait until after the 3rd course before acknowledging any inconvenience like violent chills, delirium, or a suspicious rash. You glance over at the man in question, Uncle Reggie, possibly, or a stranger who wandered in for the pudding, and note the telltale signs. Sweat despite the room being subarctic, a distant look in the eye, and a cough so wet it might qualify as a beverage. Someone offers him a drop of brandy. He accepts it with trembling hands and murmurs something about feeling a bit off. In Victorian medical terms, that means he's halfway to the afterlife. Still, the party continues. No one wants to break the spell. There's music playing, there's eel jelly being passed around, and there's still a small chance the figgy pudding won't explode this year. You all pretend that Reggie's spasms are just enthusiastic dancing. Someone even claps. Typhus, of course, is the reigning party crasher of the Victorian era. Transmitted via lice, dirty water, and general squalor, it slides into social gatherings like an unwelcome cousin and stays for weeks. Symptoms include fever, rash, confusion, and existential dread, which, to be fair, are also symptoms of most Victorian holidays. The room gets warmer. Not because of the fire, there isn't one, but because the panic is starting to simmer under all those wool layers. Aunt Judith whispers something about the fever and crosses herself with such intensity she knocks over a candlestick. Reggie groans. The pudding jiggles in fear. You retreat to the corner, pulling your scarf up over your mouth in a totally ineffective form of self-defense. The air feels thicker. The combination of sweat, coal, dust, and unease is turning it into soup. You cough reflexively, and 3 people glare at you like you've committed treason. You cough again to prove it's unrelated. It doesn't help. Someone begins insisting it's not typhus, it's just a chill. This is the standard Victorian diagnosis for everything from pneumonia to having 3 toes fall off. It's comforting, in the same way that painting a sinking ship makes it seem more seaworthy. You nod. Yes, just a chill. A very intense, contagious, organ-melting chill. Reggie is now sitting on the floor. He's being fanned with a hymnal and fed a mixture of vinegar and mustard seeds, which a neighbor swears by. You are tempted to point out that this is how they cured horses. You remain silent. He might be a horse now. No one knows. Children are ushered away with whispers and a brisk application of lavender oil. One child asks if Reggie's going to heaven. Another asks if they can have his shoes. The children are sent outside to bang pans at the spirits, which feels more symbolic than usual tonight. The music fades. The dancing has slowed. People are pretending to be interested in the wallpaper. Someone asks for tea and is told the kettle's missing. Reggie coughs again, louder this time, and a woman faints into the trifle. No one moves to help her. Eventually, Reggie is carried into the scullery to rest, which is the Victorian way of saying, we don't want him in the party photos. A new round of punch is poured, the fiddler resumes playing, and the denial kicks back into gear like a rickety old carriage going downhill with no brakes. Because if there's one thing the Victorians excelled at, it's ignoring the obvious. The roof may leak, the soup may whisper, and Uncle Reggie may now be vibrating, but as long as the pie is still warm, the party must go on. After all, it's New Year's. And nothing says fresh start like quietly pretending you're not part of a slow-moving biological disaster. Victorians love games like Snapdragon, setting raisins on fire and grabbing them with your bare hands. Because nothing says Happy New Year like third-degree burns and a faint smell of scorched eyebrow. The rules are simple. Soak raisins in brandy, set the whole thing ablaze, dim the lights, and then encourage your guests, many of whom are flammable, to plunge their fingers into the fire and fish out fruit. This is considered fun. There are no prizes, only mild trauma and a lingering sense of betrayal from whoever suggested it. Snapdragon is more than a game. It's a ritual of Victorian resilience. A test of who can snatch the fastest, scream the quietest, and pretend that their fingertips aren't currently blistering. You go first, because you were tricked into it with the phrase, "Oh, you're brave." You reach in, grab a flaming raisin, and immediately regret every decision that led you to this moment. The room cheers. Your palm throbs. Somewhere, your ancestors weep. The children want to play too. One is already brandishing a fireplace poker and singing a vaguely threatening rhyme. You suggest they wait until at least one adult sobers up, or until the flames go out, whichever comes last. They respond by trying to roast a potato in the Snapdragon bowl, and Snapdragon is just the warm-up. Next comes Blind Man's Bluff, a game where you're blindfolded, spun around, and encouraged to stumble through a room full of fragile antiques and judgmental relatives while trying to tag someone. It's a combination of hide and seek, accidental violence, and dramatic injury. You crash into a hat stand. It fights back. The hat stand wins. Then there's Hunt the Slipper, which sounds innocent until you realize it's mostly just grown adults crawling around on all fours, while a group of children scream, lie, and hide the slipper somewhere anatomically upsetting. You're on your knees under the tea table when someone's great-aunt sits on you. The slipper is never found. You suspect it wasn't real. Charades follows, because no Victorian gathering is complete without the slow destruction of social bonds through miscommunication. You're trying to act out Moby Dick, But everyone keeps guessing influenza. The mime for whale results in someone accusing you of making fun of Uncle Bertie's weight, and an actual fight breaks out. You slink away. Someone suggests the minister's cat, a game where everyone must describe the minister's cat using a different adjective for each letter of the alphabet. It begins as a charming word game and quickly devolves into chaos. By the time you reach Q, someone declares the minister's cat is quarrelsome while glaring at their spouse. The room goes quiet. Forfeits are next. A game where players who fail at other games must complete dares, like singing a song, kissing someone, or pretending to be a tree. You lose at charades and are told to recite a romantic poem to the coal scuttle. You do this with passion. Too much passion. The coal scuttle is now engaged. By now, tensions are high. Aunt Mildred has threatened to exile anyone who cheats at Pass the Slipper again. Two cousins are feuding over whether a blindfold counts as strategy. A man named Douglas is under the table, claiming he's still playing. No one knows what game, or if he was invited. Finally, someone announces Consequences, a storytelling game involving paper, folding, and a dangerous amount of passive-aggressive creativity. It ends with a scandalous tale in which Maud met a chimney sweep at the punch bowl and eloped via cabbage cart. Maud is in the room. Maud is not amused, and still the games continue. Because in Victorian England, merriment walks a thin line between laughter and litigation. So you raise your blistered fingers, your bruised dignity, and your half-scorched raisin in the air, and toast to the fact that no one's lost an eye. Yet, New Year's in the 1850s, where fun comes with rules, danger, and at least one accidental proposal, everything has meaning. Which foot you step on first, whether you've swept the hearth, how your spoon sits. You're so afraid of bad luck you almost forget you're already poor and it's raining inside your house. The Victorians didn't dabble in superstition, they majored in it. Every twitch of the eye, misplaced broom, or creaky stair could mean impending doom, or, at the very least, soggy potatoes. And New Year's was the championship tournament of omens. You wake up already nervous, having accidentally put your left foot on the floor first. The moment your heel touches the cold wooden plank, you gasp. The left foot means misfortune. The right foot is for luck. The fact that your floor is also damp with sealing rain only intensifies the creeping dread. You hop back into bed and try again. Right foot, then left. Too late. The demons saw everything. You shuffle into the kitchen and immediately check the hearth. It's unswept. Disaster. The ashes from last year are still there, which some say brings prosperity, while others claim it ensures a year of heartbreak and mold. You panic sweep, then stop. Sweeping on New Year's is also bad, because it's said to sweep away your luck. You stand frozen, holding a soot-covered broom, whispering sorry to a possibly haunted fireplace. Then comes the salt. Salt protects against evil, which makes sense, because it also protects pork. You throw a pinch over your left shoulder. The salt lands in your tea. You drink it anyway. It's the safest thing you've consumed all week. Someone knocks on the door. You freeze. It's early. What if it's a woman? The first footing rule says the first person to enter your home in the new year must be a dark-haired man bringing coal, bread, and whiskey. If it's a redhead, you're cursed. If it's a blonde woman, you're cursed and gossiped about. You creep toward the door like it's a wild animal. You crack it open. It's Maud. Maud, with her lovely golden curls and a face that screams, "I definitely didn't bring coal." She grins. You pale. You consider slamming the door, but she's already stepped inside, complimenting your curtain mold. you're doomed. The rest of the year will be sour milk and stubbed toes. You quickly light a candle to ward off misfortune and mutter a prayer in the direction of the pantry. Someone once said bay leaves help with luck, so you eat one. It scratches your throat. You start coughing. The dog panics and knocks over the candle. Now the room smells like fear and singed dust. Other rules echo in your brain. Don't cry today, or you'll cry all year. Don't lend money, or you'll lose it forever. Don't speak ill of anyone. You glance at your cousin and purse your lips. He's wearing socks as gloves. It's too easy. You glance at the ceiling. A solitary sprig of mistletoe dangles threateningly. Legend says it must be taken down and burned by the new year to avoid misfortune. You forgot. You watch it sway above you like the sword of Damocles, held up by a bent nail and years of indifference. You suddenly remember the calendar rule. If you don't have a new one hung before midnight, time itself will betray you. You sprint to the bureau, grab the almanac, and pin it to the wall using a fork. You whisper order at it, just to be sure. Your entire day is a ballet of avoidance. No sewing ties your fate into knots, no laundry washes away luck, no mirrors invites spirits, and absolutely no sweeping under someone's feet curses their love life, apparently forever. By midnight, you are exhausted, jittery, and lightly salted. You haven't spoken a negative word in 14 hours. Your house is covered in symbolic vegetables. Your cat won't stop staring at the salt circle you accidentally created in the pantry. But you did it. You survived the Victorian superstition gauntlet. And sure, you may still be poor, your chimney may still drip. But spiritually, you're fortified. Probably. Unless you looked in a mirror after sunset, in which case, sorry. Good luck next year. You wander to the pub, where ale flows like regret, and every man sings slightly off-key. Someone plays the fiddle. Someone else falls down the stairs. This is considered a success. The Victorian public house is less of a bar and more of a controlled experiment in communal chaos. The walls are sticky with time, the ceiling leaks something that may or may not be ale, and the floor is a patchwork of discarded pipe ash, breadcrumbs, and one man who claims he's resting his eyes in solidarity with the drunk. You arrive just in time for the New Year's festivities, which mostly involve sitting on uneven benches and trying not to inhale too deeply. The smell is a heady blend of sweat, yeast, soot, and ambition. You duck under a low beam and immediately knock off your hat. It is caught mid-air by a stranger who returns it with a toast and a wink. You don't ask questions. It's better that way. The bartender greets you with a nod and an expression that says, "I've seen things." You order a pint of the house ale, an opaque, frothy mystery that tastes like the concept of bread remembered in a dream. It's warm, of course. All pub beverages in this era are served at the precise temperature of tepid bathwater. You take a sip and feel something slide across your tongue. You don't investigate. At the table nearest the fireplace, a game of cards is underway. The stakes are low. Buttons, crusts of pie, a single sock. A man named Bernard bets his moustache comb. He loses. The comb is immediately used by someone else at the table who declares, "New year, new face." You back away slowly. Music erupts from the far corner. An elderly fiddler who appears to have been playing the same song since 1834. The tune is hauntingly upbeat and slightly off-tempo, but the crowd claps along with a determination that makes rhythm irrelevant. Someone adds a tambourine to the mix. Someone else adds yodeling. It's unclear if they're part of the band or just experiencing euphoria. As the hour grows late and the fumes grow stronger, the singing begins. Rowdy choruses of half-remembered folk songs echo through the pub, each one louder and more unhinged than the last. The lyrics change with every verse. What started as "My love went down to Devon" is now about a goat named Stanley and his dreams of seafaring. Then comes the dancing, or something like it. A man leaps up and begins clogging with impressive fervor, kicking over a stool and nearly knocking the fire irons into the soup pot. No one minds. In fact, they cheer. You're handed a tambourine and encouraged to join. You comply. It's not worth resisting. You are now tambourine royalty. Just as things begin to feel festive, a fight breaks out. It's quick and ceremonial. Someone called someone else a lukewarm pudding of a man. Apologies are exchanged. More drinks are poured. The cycle resets. You stumble outside for fresh air and are promptly handed a pickled egg by a stranger wearing only one shoe and a sash that reads Captain of the New Year. You nod respectfully and eat the egg. It tastes like vinegar and poor decisions. Back inside, someone passes out on the billiards table. Another man confesses his love to the beer tap. A woman climbs onto a bench to recite a poem about chimney soot and loneliness. Everyone applauds. The pub never truly closes. People simply drift off into corners, coat themselves in wool, and pretend the splinters are comforting. You finish your pint, now more foam than fluid, and toast the ceiling, because in Victorian England, the public house isn't just where you drink. It's where you forget the cold, forgive your neighbour's smell, and survive the new year. One pint, one ballad, and one baffling egg at a time. You hear a knock. Could be a kind neighbour bringing stew, or a desperate chimney sweep hoping to crash on your floor. You answer anyway. It's 1852. You're already emotionally numb. The door knock in Victorian England is never just a door knock. It's a mystery novel wrapped in fog and wool. Is it a blessing, a burglary, a roaming bard? You pause with one hand on the latch, rehearsing polite greetings and defensive stances in equal measure. You open it cautiously. Outside stands a man you don't recognize, but he's holding a sack. This is deeply concerning. In this era, a man with a sack is either Santa Claus or someone who recently was Santa Claus but has since turned to light crime. "Happy New Year," he wheezes, producing a lump of something vaguely stew-like in a cloth. "Brought you this." You thank him awkwardly. Accept the cloth, which is damp and warm in a way that suggests danger, and set it on a nearby plate. He stands there, waiting. You realize this isn't a gift, it's a trade. He wants tea or food or a place to sleep, or all three. He's clearly not leaving. This is the Victorian social dance. Hospitality is sacred, boundaries are theoretical, and doors are more like suggestions than barriers. Anyone can stop by, relatives, strangers, chimney sweeps named Roger who just need somewhere to rest their knees. You once let in a man who claimed to be your cousin from Leeds. He turned out to be an amateur puppeteer and stayed 3 weeks. Tonight, the knocking continues. A second visitor arrives, a barefoot child with a riddle, a grin, and a suspiciously professional cough. He's holding a broken lantern and a dead mouse, which he refers to as Sir Nibbles. You nod respectfully, hand over a coin, and send him on his way before he recites poetry. Then a woman arrives with a jar of pickled something and a smile that screams, "I've seen the void." She's selling good fortune. Literally. For a halfpenny, she'll tell you if your crops will fail and whether your husband is secretly allergic to you. You decline. She hisses softly and disappears into the fog. The last knock of the evening is soft. Too soft. You open the door to find no one there. Just a bundle of twigs, tied with ribbon, and a faint smell of cinnamon. You look around. Nothing. You consider whether you've been cursed, blessed, or pranked by seasonal witches. You bring it inside anyway. You're not taking chances. You hear someone shout, "Run," from down the lane. The house is now full of people who weren't originally yours. A man is asleep near the fireplace. Someone is rummaging through your bread box with the focus of a surgeon. Two children are arguing over whose turn it is to stir the air with a wooden spoon. You sigh and ladle out some broth. It's the only way. You sit back and look around. No one seems dangerous. Just cold. Hungry. Loud. Very, very loud. You smile, in spite of yourself. This is what New Year's looks like in Victorian England. Foggy, unpredictable, and full of uninvited guests who may or may not rob you, bless your crops, or steal your cat. And honestly, that's kind of the charm. You sip your weak tea, now shared with a man named Cyril, who says he dreams of opening a cheese cart, and nod along to someone tuning a fiddle in your pantry. The stew simmers. The room is warm. The chaos is familiar, because sometimes a knock at the door isn't the end of your piece. It's just the start of another weird, slightly magical evening in 1852. Town criers stomp through the streets shouting announcements. It's like Twitter. If Twitter wore a tricorn hat and shouted through a trumpet at 3 a.m., you pretend to care. Victorian England doesn't have group chats, status updates, or push notifications. What it does have is Harold, the local town crier, who, instead of texting you news, bellows it into your soul through a brass horn while stomping up cobblestone streets with the grace of a hungover warhorse. It's just past midnight. You've barely finished your last mouthful of questionable pudding when you hear it. The distant clank of boots, the mournful squawk of a dented bugle, and the unmistakable bark of a man committed to tradition and volume over accuracy. "Hear ye," he cries, voice cracking slightly. "The new year is upon us, and Margaret Jenkins has a chicken for sale." You nod solemnly from your window. It's 1852. This is important news. Harold is followed by two boys who carry lanterns and look absolutely exhausted. One of them is eating a turnip. The other keeps tripping over his own scarf. This is their punishment for trying to nick a pie earlier in the week. Justice. Victorian style. Criers like Harold were once official messengers of the crown. By now, they're glorified foghorns for anything deemed slightly relevant, including livestock sightings, unclaimed boots, and updates on who's just sneezed near the baker's wife. They're the human equivalent of an email chain you can't unsubscribe from. Hear ye, let it be known that Widow Catherthwaite's cat has returned home, but only in spirit. You blink. That sounds like a haunting, Harold continues. The moon is in its third sulking phase, and Mr. Drury's trousers have been found near the apothecary. People poke their heads out of windows, not to hear the news, but to confirm Harold hasn't finally snapped and started yelling about imaginary frogs. He hasn't, yet. A neighbor across the lane shouts back, "Tell us something useful." Harold responds, "The post office is still closed. The rats have unionized." You respect the man. It's not an easy job, wandering icy streets in a wool coat that smells like soup, yelling into the abyss while your breath fogs in front of your face like spectral commentary. But Harold is undeterred. He marches on, belting out updates between trumpet blasts and occasional swigs from a flask labeled medicinal vinegar. You wonder how many of these criers are real, and how many are just men in hats looking for attention. You saw one last year who yelled the same announcement 4 times in a row, forgot where he was, then asked if anyone had seen his boot. Everyone applauded. Criers are part of the New Year ritual. They announce the moment the old year ends, and the new one begins. Loudly, dramatically, and sometimes while wrestling with a goose. That's what happened last year. The goose won. Tonight, Harold pauses beneath your window and proclaims, "This house, this fine establishment, did not return my bowl from last March. Shame." May your turnips be spongy. You quickly throw a crust of bread at him. It's a peace offering. He nods and continues marching. He ends his round at the town square, where he declares, "The year is now 1852. All debts are still valid, and emotional damage is not covered." Everyone cheers. Someone throws their hat in the air. It lands on a chimney, and just like that, the town crier vanishes into the mist, taking with him the last ounce of dignity the night had to offer. Because in Victorian England, if you can't trust a man in wool yelling about local eggs at ungodly hours, who can you trust? Someone lets off a firecracker. It explodes, startles a horse, and knocks over a barrel of pickled eels. Now it's a party. Fireworks in Victorian England are not the elegant choreographed light shows you might know today. No, these are explosives, barely legal, rarely predictable, and always held by someone who looks like they once lost a thumb and considered it character building. They're more controlled detonation than celebration. And they appear without warning, like unpaid debts or typhus. The first one goes off around 11:43 p.m., a shrieking, crackling whistle followed by a bang that echoes through 3 boroughs and possibly ruptures time itself. Your tea spills. The baby starts crying. The window shutters shake like they're trying to escape. A dog howls in Latin. This is how you know the festivities have begun. Nobody knows who sets them off. There are whispers about that boy from Miller's Alley, but no one's ever caught him. He wears fingerless gloves and smells faintly of saltpeter. You once saw him juggling gunpowder in the churchyard and claiming he was summoning a celebration. Your street goes tense. Horses panic. One rears and bolts down the lane, dragging an unattended cart filled with cabbages. A group of small children cheer and chase after it, treating it like a festive parade float. One old man begins yelling that it's just like the siege of Ghent, which may or may not have happened in his lifetime. The firecracker lands near the market stall where someone's storing a barrel of pickled eels for tomorrow's leftovers. It topples. The barrel rolls downhill and splits open, releasing a slippery stampede of angry, vinegary eels. People scream. Someone slips. A woman claims she saw the Virgin Mary in the mess, but it was just a fishbone. Meanwhile, other revelers take this as a cue to join in. More firecrackers are produced, from pockets, baskets, and one man's walking cane, which doubles as an amateur cannon. He lights a fuse with a cigar, points it vaguely skyward, and hopes for the best. The rocket arcs beautifully and lands in someone's laundry. Boom! Socks rain from the heavens. One child catches a scorched bloomer's leg and wears it like a victory sash. You, in your infinite optimism, try to retreat inside. But your cousin has already declared the garden safe for launching and is currently building a mortar out of an old milk churn and a pipe. You don't stop him. You simply write down your will on the back of a figgy pudding label and hand it to the cat. Back on the street, someone has lit a Catherine wheel to the side of a wooden shed. It spins with the intensity of 1,000 angry bees, sparks flying in all directions, people cheering like it's a duel. The shed catches fire slightly. No one notices. A man with a bucket wanders over and pours punch on it. Problem solved. Through the chaos, a fiddler plays something upbeat. No one can hear it. But he keeps going, bow scraping furiously, possibly to drown out the sound of incoming projectiles. A spark lands in someone's mulled wine. He drinks it anyway and declares it invigorating. By midnight, the air is thick with smoke, joy, and mild concussions. People are hugging, coughing, and pretending they didn't just see a chicken get launched into the sky by accident. A cheer rises up from the fog, followed by a final, defiant boom. Silence falls. Then someone says, "Let's do that again next year." Because nothing says Happy New Year in 1852 like minor property damage, scorched wool, and the faint ringing in your ears that will last until Easter. Cheers. The air smells of smoke, sweat, boiled meat, and ambition. It's foul and oddly comforting. You take a deep breath and instantly regret it. This is the scent of 1852, New Year's edition. 1 part firewood, 1 part wool sweat, and 12 parts overcooked hope. Every home is belching out coal smoke like it's trying to win an award, and everyone inside those homes is marinating in layers of damp flannel, tallow candles, and ambition that hasn't bathed in weeks. You step outside for air. Mistake. Immediately, you're hit by a thick cloud of chimney soot blended with the distant tang of pickled eggs and cheap tobacco. There's also something faintly herbal. Someone nearby is burning juniper branches for good luck, or possibly to mask the smell of unwashed dog. It's not working. A man passes you briskly, trailing behind him the unmistakable scent of boiled cabbage and failure. You nod politely. He nods back. That was your New Year's greeting. The smell of his coat lingers like a memory you didn't ask for. The street itself is alive with odorous possibility. To your left, a puddle of uncertain origin, steaming faintly. To your right, someone roasting chestnuts in what looks suspiciously like a repurposed coal scuttle. The aroma is actually pleasant, until the wind shifts and carries with it the nearby pub's miasma of ale-soaked boots, singed pork, and a bar mat that hasn't been washed since the Napoleonic Wars. You consider breathing through your mouth. Another mistake. That just gives you texture. From inside the houses you catch glimpses of holiday feasts, meats sweating on trays, puddings heaving with suet, and the occasional boiled onion weeping quietly in a bowl. These smells leak out into the night and mingle freely with the aromas of wet wool, dog fur, and the unmistakable tang of overly festive cheese. Somewhere nearby, someone has spilled punch. It's sugary, spiced, and infused with the tears of optimism. It mixes with the smell of mud from the lane and creates something that can only be described as seasonal sadness. A child slips in it, gets up and yells, "I'm fine," in a tone that suggests otherwise. The town square is worse. That's where people gather, full of song and sausage. Fires have been lit, but not contained. A barrel has tipped over. There are eels involved again. Why are there always eels? And everywhere, absolutely everywhere, is the scent of smoke. It clings to your clothes, your hair, your dreams. It curls into your soup and stares at you from the fireplace. It's in the walls. It is the walls. By midnight, your entire existence smells like someone tried to set fire to a meat pie and then gave up halfway. And yet somehow, it's comforting, familiar, a little disgusting, sure, but also a warm reminder that you made it through another year of coal rations, questionable dairy, and weather that actively tries to kill you. The foul air is practically a hug, a damp, ash-scented, vaguely meaty hug. You lean against the doorframe, inhaling the chaos, and accept it. This is what a new year smells like in Victorian England. Rough, smoky, a bit fermented, and full of the kind of hope that wears hand-me-down socks. Tomorrow, you'll air out the house. Or at least crack a window and pretend that counts. But for now, breathe it in, briefly, shallowly, and with full awareness that it's mostly chimney. Happy New Year. It stinks. And somehow, it's perfect. Everyone sings. No one knows the words. Your uncle weeps openly, even though he's never met a man named Lang. You pat his back with mild concern. It's the end of the night. Spirits are high or low, or possibly sideways. Your stomach is full of pickled things. The room is lit by flickering candles, the last coals in the fireplace, and the dim, haunting glow of emotional vulnerability. And then, Like clockwork, it begins. Someone hums the opening notes of Auld Lang Syne. It spreads through the room like a well-meaning plague. No one is quite sure when they learned this song. They just seem to know it, or at least pretend to. The words are slurred, jumbled, passed down through generations like a cherished family misquote. The title itself is a mystery. Is it a person? A place? A recipe? No one asks. No one dares. Your uncle, who has had a suspicious number of small sherries, stands, hand over heart, eyes already glossy. He belts out the first line with the raw power of a man who once lost a love, a job, and a particularly good coat, all in the same winter. His voice cracks on the second line. He sobs into a cushion. No one stops him. Around him, the others join in. Arms are linked, shoulders sway. The pitch is approximate. Some sing too high, some too low. Some not at all but move their lips like background actors in a tragedy. It's the sound of unity. It's also the sound of 12 people realizing they should have eaten less pudding. You glance across the room at Cousin Muriel, who appears to be mouthing the ingredients to a pie. Next to her, young Peter has given up entirely and is just humming God Save the Queen to the tune of Greensleeves. He's 6. No one corrects him. The lyrics are supposed to evoke nostalgia, reflection, old friends not forgotten. Instead, the crowd gets stuck on verse 2 and starts repeating verse 1 in increasing emotional volume. Someone mumbles something about cup of kindness. You hold up your cup, which contains something that might once have been ale, and nod like you understand. Your uncle is now openly weeping. His tears are sincere, though their origin remains unclear. He might be thinking of a lost love. He might be mourning the pie that burned earlier. He might have just remembered he still owes back taxes on a mule. You'll never know. The dog howls. Someone raises their voice to hit a high note and physically knocks over a side table. No one stops singing. The song has become a runaway sled, impossible to steer, impossible to stop. The tempo increases slightly, probably due to panic. Then, like a fever breaking, the final line is reached. Should old acquaintance be forgot and never brought to mind? It fades into a near whisper. Eyes are closed, faces turned upward. It's all very dramatic until someone sneezes into the silence and loudly says, "Well, that was sadder than I expected." The moment is gone. There's a pause. Your uncle coughs, wipes his nose with a napkin made of someone's old bonnet, and announces, "That one's for Ethel." No one knows who Ethel is. The room exhales. The fire pops. A toast is raised, not to new beginnings, but to having survived another year without accidentally marrying a cousin or setting the pantry on fire. And while no one actually remembers the words to Auld Lang Syne, everyone remembers the feeling of standing together, slightly off-key, slightly drunk, slightly damp, and entirely human. It's tradition. It's closure. It's deeply weird, just like every good New Year's should be. The party's over. You trudge through slush, avoiding rats and existential thoughts. A carriage splashes you. You sigh and accept it as symbolic. It's now well past midnight, and you've reached the part of the Victorian New Year's experience where festivity gives way to fatigue, and the only thing louder than your footsteps is the quiet echo of self-reflection and minor trauma. You step into the street. The slush greets you like an old, wet friend. Your boots, which were never waterproof, and possibly not even yours, immediately soak through. The icy mix of snow, soot, and horse residue squelches in with the eagerness of a party guest who doesn't know when to leave. You consider removing your shoes entirely, but the cobblestones are sharp, and you've recently seen a rat the size of a toddler. The streets are dim and mostly deserted. save for the occasional shape of a staggering figure ahead. Some are neighbors, some may be ghosts. At this hour, the distinction feels academic. You pass a man sleeping upright in a doorway, wrapped in a curtain and snoring like he's in a competition. You nod respectfully and keep moving. A distant bell chimes, reminding you that time is both ongoing and merciless. Somewhere behind you, a crier is still shouting fragments of news. Pigs missing. New year begun. Jam for tuppence. You don't turn around. Your clothes, once festive, red passable, are now wilting. Your hat is askew. Your scarf has absorbed something unpleasant. Your coat, damp from sweat and ale vapor, clings to you like a disappointed relative. You look up. It's snowing, but barely. More of a lazy drizzle of ice confetti. It lands on your eyelashes and melts with the same energy as your remaining hopes for a better year. Suddenly, splash, a carriage speeds by, wheels cutting straight through a puddle and launching a wave of brownish slush directly onto your thighs. The driver does not stop. The horse, to its credit, looks embarrassed. You close your eyes, inhale deeply, and whisper, "Of course." The symbolism is not lost on you. This is how it always ends, cold, wet, and vaguely betrayed by someone in a top hat. You keep walking. A group of revelers stumbles past you, laughing at nothing, singing something. One of them tries to high-five a lamppost and fails. They all smell like smoke and ham. You wish them well from a safe, emotional distance. You pass by familiar landmarks. The bakery where you once bought a bun that tasted like soap. The alley where you lost a boot in 1849. The church steps where someone is currently vomiting quietly behind a barrel marked donations. The comfort of routine. A light in the distance, your house. Your sanctuary. Your sanctuary with drafty windows, a leaking roof, and a mysterious stain that no one speaks of. But still, it's home. You reach your front door. Your key sticks. It always does. You jiggle it with the skill of someone who's fought this battle before. The lock clicks. You're in. Inside, the air is stale but dry. You peel off your outer layers like an onion of regret. Your toes are numb. Your knees creak. You drop your hat onto a chair that immediately collapses in protest. You light a candle. Its soft glow casts flickering shadows over the room. You're alone, but in a peaceful way. The fire is out. The tea is cold. The cat is judging you, but you're home, alive, intact, emotionally, if not physically. You sit, you breathe. The new year has begun, not with fireworks, not with triumph, but with slush in your socks and the slow, satisfying exhale of surviving. And honestly, that feels just right. The new year begins with a sky the color of porridge and clouds shaped like disappointment. You stare at it, hoping for something profound. You get dampness. It's officially morning. And nature has decided to greet you with a lukewarm shrug. There's no golden glow breaking through the horizon. No birds singing in hopeful harmony. Just a heavy, milky sky that seems personally offended by your optimism. It's the kind of sunrise that feels like it's judging you, quietly, but with intent. The sun technically rises at 8:13 a.m., but you wouldn't know it. All you see is grey. Not the crisp, elegant grey of a fresh coat or an old wolf, but the kind of grey that lives in the cracks of window panes and the inside of undercooked sausages. You blink, still grey. The rooftops are damp. The streets are soggy. A fine mist hangs in the air, like the breath of a particularly disinterested ghost. You lean on your windowsill, wrapped in a blanket that smells like dust, and your regrets from 1847 and try to feel something. All you get is a droplet of condensation falling directly into your tea. Somewhere down the lane, A rooster crows weakly, as if even he couldn't be bothered today. You nod in agreement. The new year has arrived, and already it's tracking slush into the carpet. You wander outside because it feels like something you're supposed to do to witness the fresh start. What you witness instead is your neighbor, still asleep in a chair on his porch, clutching a broken shoe and humming Auld Lang Syne into his scarf. A stray dog trots past with a ribbon tied around its middle and a sausage in its mouth. Neither appear to be his. You consider chasing it. You do not. Let him have his victory. You stand in the street, staring upward like a Victorian philosopher with a mild headache. You were promised the symbolic cleansing of a new day. What you've received is mild drizzle and a growing suspicion that your boots are now permanently damp. The sky lightens, barely, a shift from porridge to wet flour. Still, it counts. You inhale deeply. The air smells of ash, overcooked beef, and wet horse. You tell yourself this is invigorating. It's not. It's just Tuesday. A child passes by, dragging a stick through the mud, with the determination of someone ploughing emotional fields. She stops, looks at you, and says, "You look like a sad broom." Then she leaves. You sit on a wooden crate and contemplate your New Year's resolutions. Less gin? More reading? Better hygiene? A second pair of socks? They all feel ambitious. You write down, breathe more intentionally on a scrap of paper, and immediately lose it to a gust of wind. The sky giggles. Time passes. Nothing happens. The mist refuses to lift. The clouds remain motionless. The world feels paused, like it's buffering. You eventually go back inside. The fire has gone out. The cat has stolen your chair. You make more tea. Sit on a cushion that is 40% stuffing and 60% betrayal, and pull a shawl over your knees like a person twice your age. Outside, the sky remains unchanged. Not angry. Not cheerful. Just blank. And yet, in a strange way, it feels appropriate. The new year isn't here to dazzle you. It's not bursting in with fanfare or pyrotechnics. It's creeping in, damp-footed and sleepy-eyed, just like you. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough. Because even in the greyest morning, there's the faintest glimmer of potential hidden behind the clouds. Wrapped in mist. Smelling faintly of cabbage. But it's there. Happy New Year. You try your mother's cure, a raw egg in gin. You try your neighbour's, chewing burnt toast while reciting Psalm 14. Nothing helps. You still feel like someone punched your spirit. Welcome to the Victorian hangover. The kind that doesn't just haunt your head, but your entire existence. Your bones ache, your teeth feel fuzzy, your thoughts move like cold treacle. You don't remember what time you got home. You do remember making polite conversation with a hat stand and challenging a pudding to a duel. So, not your finest evening, and now, the consequences. Your skull pulses like it's being used to test small cannons. Light offends you. Sound is a personal attack. Even the gentle rustling of a curtain feels like judgment. You lie there, cocooned in wool and shame, praying for relief or death. Whichever arrives first. Your mother enters with a face full of smug wisdom and a concoction that looks like regret in a mug. She calls it restorative broth. You call it soup that got into a fight. It smells like beef, soap, and something definitely not legal in most parishes. Drink it, she insists, and don't breathe through your nose. You obey. The texture is gritty. A mysterious chunk lodges in your throat. You don't ask questions. Asking questions implies you want answers, and right now, ignorance is your only comfort. When that fails to help, possibly because it made you briefly forget your own name. You move on to the neighbor's suggestion: burnt toast and a psalm. The toast is so charred it could double as coal. You chew while muttering. The fool says in his heart, "There is no God," which feels a bit aggressive for your current condition. Halfway through, you start coughing violently and spill tea on the cat. The cat hisses. You apologize. The cat does not forgive. Aunt Petunia has her own method. Standing barefoot on cold stone, while sniffing vinegar and chanting the name of your least favorite cousin. You try it. It does not help. It may have summoned a ghost. You quietly reshut the cupboard. Next up, hair of the dog. The idea is that drinking more alcohol cures the poison. You pour yourself a small tot of leftover punch. It tastes like regret and overripe banana. You gag. Your body begins negotiations with gravity. You lie down again, whispering, "Never again," even though you and everyone around you knows that is a lie. A pamphlet from the apothecary recommends a tonic made of rhubarb, ginger, and ammonia. You consider it. Then remember you once mistook rhubarb for a weaponized weed, and ginger makes you weep. You skip the ammonia entirely. There are other cures. Lying in a dark room and contemplating your choices, breathing deeply through a sock stuffed with mint, rubbing your temples with goose fat while a neighbor sings sea shanties in minor key. None of them are scientifically sound, but neither is your current condition. Your uncle suggests sweating it out. He hands you a thick wool blanket and encourages vigorous pacing. You wrap yourself like a sad burrito and make it halfway down the hall before collapsing onto a pile of firewood. You remain there for 35 minutes, during which time you hallucinate a conversation with the wallpaper. Eventually, you return to your bed. The pillow welcomes you back. Like a forgiving parent, the room spins only slightly. You close your eyes. You breathe, and finally, something shifts. The pain dulls. The nausea retreats. The fog lifts just a little. You're still wounded. You may never fully recover. But you are, against all odds, alive. Because if there's one thing more persistent than a Victorian hangover, it's a Victorian survivor. Now please, someone bring you water. Or a time machine. Either would do. As you sit down with your journal, you reflect on what you did last night. Kissed a stranger, danced too hard, possibly joined a cult. All in all, a typical Victorian New Year. You're still in your underthings, though whether they're yours is anyone's guess. There's mud on your elbow, glitter in your eyebrows, and your right boot is missing entirely. You don't even feel confident calling what you're doing sitting. It's more of a sideways slump into a piece of furniture that gave up around 1834. The candle flickers weakly beside you, clearly judging your life choices. You open your journal, hand-stitched, monogrammed, and currently spattered with what may be gravy, and begin documenting your descent into chaos. A brief but honest account of everything I regret and may have to apologize for. Kissed a stranger in the coat room. Possibly Harold. Possibly Harold's mother. Neither has made eye contact since. Joined hands in a New Year's circle with people wearing matching capes. Was told I was now initiated. Unsure if this refers to a cult or just Harold's bowling league. Tried to flirt using 17th century poetry. Accidentally insulted someone's ankles. Ate something labeled mystery aspic. Still don't know what aspic is. Still don't feel okay. Tripped into a decorative table, claimed it attacked me, and challenged it to a duel. You pause to sip tea. Cold, possibly haunted. There's a raisin floating in it. You write, "This tea has seen things." Next page. People I should probably send notes to. Mrs. Elkins, for stealing her bonnet and insisting it was sacred headgear. The coal man, for calling him a spirit of the underworld and then throwing confetti in his face. Maud for proposing marriage in the punch queue, and then again in the coat room, and then once more in the outhouse queue. My own reflection for pointing at it in a mirror and shouting "imposter" in front of guests. Then, New Year's resolutions I will break before Epiphany. I will not drink anything served from a copper basin. I will refrain from joining secret societies unless they provide snacks. I will not confuse interpretive dance with traditional mourning gestures. I will keep my aspirations to no more than 3 at a time. I will verify whether the people I kiss are conscious participants. You pause. A faint memory surfaces. You were in the pantry, giving a heartfelt speech to a moldy loaf of bread. You told it you believed in its potential. Another. Standing atop a footstool, howling Auld Lang Syne with your eyes closed and your socks on your hands. You claimed you were channeling the spirits of lost mittens. Your pen trembles. You write, "It wasn't even midnight yet. Outside, a dog barks. Inside, your cat sighs like a disappointed roommate." You add a final entry under things I may now own. A lace glove, a pamphlet on potato-based enlightenment, the lingering fear that someone named Mistress Clarity now expects me to lead a solstice ritual. You shut the journal, ashamed and slightly proud. You survived another Victorian New Year. You danced until your knees betrayed you, pledged yourself to at least 2 questionable organizations, and probably insulted a lord. And now, you are ready to forget, just as soon as you finish writing it all down in painful detail. Because that, dear listener, is how memories are made, with ink, scandal, and the soothing knowledge that everyone else probably did worse. Happy New Year. Now go lie down. And then it's just January again. The decorations are wilted, the wassail is sour, everyone is coughing, and life, ever persistent, goes on. You return to work, slightly more broken, definitely more tired. Once a year, you bathe. Not because you want to, but because social pressure dictates that a fresh year requires a fresh stench. You fill a tin tub with lukewarm hope, ladle in some rainwater you found in a bucket, and sit in it like a nervous ham. The water turns grey instantly. There's no soap, only a bar of lye that burns your regrets into your pores. You emerge cleanish, vulnerable, and smelling faintly of boiled wool and anxiety. The Victorian New Year's bath is not a luxurious soak. It is a ritual cleansing that walks the tightrope between hygiene and self-harm. And it is not taken lightly. It involves logistics, planning, and emotional preparation typically reserved for battle or childbirth. First, you must find the tub. It's stored behind the pantry, wedged between a broken harpsichord and a pile of old potatoes that may or may not be sentient. You drag it out with the resolve of a condemned man and set it down in front of the hearth, which is gently belching smoke and judging you. Then comes the water. There is no plumbing. There is only the pail, the kettle, and an endless cycle of near-scalding despair. You boil water on the fire, lug it to the tub, and repeat until you have accumulated enough liquid to cover your knees and no more. The result is tepid at best. Enthusiasts refer to it as warm adjacent. Skeptics just call it soggy disappointment. You disrobe with the speed of someone peeling off a wet curtain. Your garments land in a heap. So tragic, even the cat looks away. You lower yourself into the water slowly, partly due to the temperature, partly because your joints are negotiating their contract. Once submerged, a generous term, you sit still. Any movement causes a tidal wave that could soak the rug, which is your only piece of furniture that doesn't smell like soup. You stare ahead, arms pressed to your sides like a Victorian roast. The sensation is humbling. For washing, you have tools, a stiff cloth that could sand wood, a bar of lye soap that's roughly as friendly as sulfuric acid, and a sponge that may have once been part of a hat. You begin with your arms, then your face, then the vague perimeter of your dignity. Everything stings. Not because you're wounded, but because your skin has never experienced this much attention. The water, once only murky, now looks like the Thames after a horse fair. Flecks of coal dust, floating lint, and an unidentified legume drift past. You don't ask where it came from, you just nod solemnly, as if to say, "Welcome, traveller." At some point, someone knocks on the door. You scream that the tub is occupied. The door opens anyway. It's your aunt, holding a ladle of mint-infused vinegar. She says it's invigorating. You say nothing because you're too busy trying not to cry. After 20 agonizing minutes, you rise. Water cascades off your body like a sad fountain. You wrap yourself in a towel the consistency of roofing felt and shuffle to your room. Dripping, steaming, and emotionally unmoored. You dress slowly. Your skin feels raw, like you've just molted. You're technically cleaner, but at what cost? You sit back down by the fire, clutching a mug of something brown and warm, and wonder if next year you could just rub yourself with pine needles and call it even. But then, just for a moment, you catch a whiff of yourself. Not cabbage, not coal, just vaguely neutral, and in 1852, that's basically a miracle. So here's to you. Cleanish, damp, emotionally tender, ready to face another year, one scrub at a time. In a village this superstitious, you don't welcome the new year without a visit to Agnes, the local crone who claims to read your future in vegetable bruises. You hand her a coin and a soft root vegetable. She squints at it, mutters something about heartbreak, and spits into the fire. You nod solemnly. You don't believe in magic, but you also can't afford to anger someone who keeps bones in jars labelled Margaret. Agnes is one of those permanent village fixtures, like the leaning well or the goat with one eye who plays dead for fun. She's been 78 for the last 30 years, walks with a staff carved from a lightning-struck fence post, and wears no fewer than 7 shawls at all times. No one knows where she lives. She just appears, usually at dusk. Sometimes during dramatic weather, you approach her hovel, technically an abandoned bakehouse, now partially collapsed and decorated with bundles of herbs, cracked mirrors, and an ominous doll that stares into your soul. Smoke curls from the chimney in unnatural shapes. You see a goose with one red eye, pacing out front like security. You step inside and immediately regret it. The air smells like sage, damp wool, and something recently boiled that shouldn't have been. Agnes is hunched by the hearth, poking at a pot with a spoon that also seems to be a wand. She doesn't greet you. She just says, "You've brought the offering then." You produce your turnip. It's soft in places and was once used as a doorstop. You place it gently in her waiting palm. She inspects it like it's holding secrets. She says. Stubborn, full of doubt, and possibly worms. You nod. That checks out. She slices the turnip in half and holds it up to the candlelight. The bruises shimmer slightly. You pretend to see something. She mutters. A journey, a misfortune, a mild rash. She spits into the fire. It hisses. The goose outside honks once, like punctuation. Your year, she continues, will be shaped by 2 things. Misplaced affection and buttons. Too many buttons. She stares at you like this is your fault. You don't dare question it. Agnes reaches into a pouch and pulls out a handful of dried twigs, teeth, and what looks suspiciously like part of a tea biscuit. She throws them into the fire. They explode with a satisfying pop. Then she looks you dead in the eye and says, "Avoid January 14th, and Reggie." No elaboration. Behind her, the jar labelled Margaret rattles. You try to thank her. but she's already moved on, now mumbling to a taxidermied hedgehog in a tiny bonnet. You drop another coin in her bowl, out of pure self-preservation, and back away slowly. Outside, the air feels fresher. The goose eyes you, suspiciously. You nod at it. Mutual understanding is reached. As you walk home, you think about what she said. Avoid Reggie. Watch for buttons. Possibly invest in calamine lotion. It all sounds vague, but maybe that's the point. In a world full of cholera, questionable puddings, and surprise typhus, a little mystery is comforting. It gives you something to hope for, or at least something to blame when everything inevitably goes sideways. So you tuck the bruised half of the turnip into your coat pocket, just in case, because you don't believe in magic. But also, you're not stupid. Victorian England is peak ghost season. Every creak is a warning. Every foggy window might contain a face. But most haunting activity is just Dave from the next street, over trying to get out of paying his rent. He drapes himself in a bedsheet, moans dramatically, and knocks over a pie. You hit him with a broom and he flees, vowing to haunt someone richer. You go back to your stew. The ghost problem has been solved. Winter in Victorian England is less a season and more a permanent séance. The fog rolls in thick as soup, the candlelight flickers for no good reason, and every third building is rumoured to be built atop cursed ground. Everyone believes in ghosts. Or at least, they pretend to. It's part spiritualism, part boredom, and part an excuse to explain why your socks keep going missing. So when strange noises echo through the walls and your stew ladle disappears for the third time this month, naturally, you assume the worst. Your home is haunted. Until you hear the unmistakable sound of a grown man tripping over a boot and swearing through linen. That's no spirit. That's Dave. Dave, whose full-time occupation appears to be avoid responsibility, has developed a seasonal side hustle as a ghost. By developed, we mean he steals laundry, pokes holes in it for eye sockets, and waits until after midnight to wander into people's parlors groaning like a man with indigestion. Tonight, he's back at it. You hear him before you see him, an unconvincing woo that sounds more like he stubbed his toe. Then a crash. Then a very real, very human, ow, me elbow. You grab the broom. Again. When you round the corner, there he is. A lumpy spectre draped in what might have once been Aunt Beatrice's best bedsheet. He's holding a candle for dramatic effect. But it's upside down and actively dripping wax onto his boot. "Begone, foul apparition," you yell, mostly for fun. "Pay your debts, Margaret." Dave moans in a voice that suggests he's trying to disguise it but also has a cold. You point to the mess he's just made, your pie, previously cooling on the windowsill, now tragically upturned and steaming sadly on the floorboards. You raise your broom like an avenging angel of domestic order. Dave shrieks, in a tone that's more theatre than terror, and bolts for the door, tripping over the hem of his ghost costume and shouting something about how real spectres don't pay taxes. You watch him disappear into the fog with a combination of irritation and admiration. Say what you will about Dave, he's got flair. You pick up the ruined pie and scrape what you can into a bowl. No point wasting it. This is Victorian England. Flavour is a luxury, not a guarantee. Back at the hearth, you settle into your chair. The fire crackles. The broom is back in its place, ready for the next haunting. You sip your tea, which now tastes faintly of soot and vengeance. You glance at the fogged window. There's a smear on the glass that vaguely resembles a face. You narrow your eyes. Could be another ghost, could be Dave trying again, or could be condensation and your own paranoia, steeped in superstition and stew. Either way, you don't get up. Because tonight, the ghost has already been chased off, the pie has already been sacrificed, and you've reached your limit for nonsense. Let the dead rest. And if they don't, well, you've still got the broom. Sleep tight. Victorian England may be full of spirits, but most of them owe someone money. There are no glittering ballrooms here. The average home is decorated with soot, dried herbs, and bits of fabric that might once have been festive. Someone tied a ribbon to the chamber pot. Someone else nailed an orange to the wall and called it art. You hang up last year's calendar and try to forget that it's already stained with gravy fingerprints and mild emotional trauma. It's not pretty, but it's honest. Victorian New Year's decor is what you'd get if Martha Stewart met a chimney sweep and gave up. The hearth is the focal point of the room, not because it's particularly beautiful, but because it's the only thing producing warmth, light, and approximately 400 grams of airborne coal dust per hour. Your wallpaper is peeling in corners. Someone once tried to stencil flowers onto it with beet juice. Now it just looks like the aftermath of an unsupervised murder mystery dinner party. Still, you do your best to spruce the place up. You begin the festive transformation by picking out the least grimy curtain to tie back with a strand of twine. There's a faint stain in the shape of Queen Victoria's profile. Or possibly a ham. Either way, you consider it lucky. You gather decorative items. A sprig of rosemary, dried and mostly flavorless. A cracked bell, and a small jar of buttons that once held pickled eggs. You arrange them on the mantel. It looks rustic, in a did this survive a small explosion kind of way. On the table sits a centerpiece crafted from paper scraps, plum pits, and the persistent optimism of someone who's never met a tax collector. Your cousin swears it's a Victorian tradition. You suspect it's just what happened when the cat knocked over the sewing basket and no one had the energy to clean it. Nearby, a crude banner has been strung across the room. It reads Happy New Year in a mixture of twine and mild effort. The missing letters were likely sacrificed to the fireplace weeks ago during a draft panic. The only glitter comes from the accidental shavings off someone's tin shaving mirror. It sparkles in a way that says, "This was not meant for joy, but we'll take what we can get." The confetti is made of torn newspaper and dried petals from Aunt Tilda's funeral. They flutter down when someone opens the door too hard. Every time it happens, someone yells, "Magic!" and no one corrects them. The pièce de résistance is, of course, the orange nailed to the wall. It's from Christmas, long past its prime, and steadily evolving into something between a science experiment and a relic. But tradition says oranges are lucky, and you're not one to tempt fate. You added cloves to it once. Now it just smells like citrus, death, and regret. Over in the corner, someone's attempted to repurpose a broken chair into a conversation nook. It hasn't worked. Mostly it's just where people go to sulk, or slowly unravel their stockings. The chamber pot ribbon is still tied with flair, though. That was Cousin Maud's idea. She said if royalty can have thrones, so can she. It's uncomfortable how much that logic holds. In a final touch of effort, you hang the new calendar, which is, of course, last year's calendar with all the Sundays scratched out and re-inked. You try to ignore the gravy thumbprints and the ominous scribble on March 17th that just says, "Don't open the cellar." You step back and survey your work. The room is slightly more chaotic, marginally more flammable, and entirely more festive. The fire coughs dramatically. A puff of ash lands on the orange. It's perfect, because in Victorian England, celebration isn't about elegance. It's about surviving. With a bit of twine, soot, and accidental symbolism. And you've decorated despair with just enough flair to call it tradition. Gifts in Victorian England are mostly practical. Socks, pickled eggs, spoons. But the mutton is eternal. Every year it's passed from family to family like a greasy torch of obligation. It has travelled more miles than most people. You receive it, nod respectfully, and immediately re-wrap it in a sock and deliver it to Aunt Judith. She weeps, either from gratitude or salmonella. The mutton continues its cursed journey, preserved more by fear than salt. This particular slab of meat is no ordinary holiday roast. It is the mutton, capitalized in whispers, feared in kitchens, and wrapped in layers of cloth and moral confusion. No one knows where it originated. Some say it was once part of Queen Charlotte's winter feast. Others claim it was a prank gone too far during the year without a summer. All that's known is that it's been making the rounds for at least 3 generations and has developed a texture somewhere between jerky and regret. You unbox it with care, as tradition demands. It comes in a battered wooden crate, adorned with exactly one festive sprig of something greenish and unconvincing. The wrapping is ceremonial, layers of flannel, waxed paper, and a handwritten note that reads simply, "Good luck." The smell is not ideal. It doesn't exactly stink, but it emits a presence. Like how you feel when you've walked into a room where someone was recently talking about you. It's humid, complex, possibly judging you. You place it gently on the table, where the cat sniffs it, recoils, and promptly leaves the house for 3 days. Now it's your turn. You have roughly 24 hours before it's considered impolite to hang on to it. You must pass it along. But choosing a recipient isn't easy. It must be someone worthy, or at least not someone who passed it to you last year. There are rules. Loose, vague, but strictly enforced through passive aggression and pointed toasts. You settle on Aunt Judith. She lives alone, claims to enjoy cooking things with bones, and recently cursed your name during parlor charades. Perfect. You rewrap the mutton using a mismatched sock, a sprig of holly, and a tag that reads, "With fondest wishes, you do not sign your name." It is understood. The delivery is casual. You drop it on her doorstep with the stealth of a highwayman, knock, and flee into the fog. You hear her open the door, gasp, and mutter, "Oh no, not again," followed by the soft sound of weeping and a celebratory cough. Success. Aunt Judith will now decide who receives it next. The cycle will continue. The mutton, still technically edible, in the way tree bark is technically edible, will pass from kitchen to parlor to outhouse and back again. Some say it's cursed. Others say it's simply well-aged. But either way, no one has dared cook it in decades. One cousin tried once. The pan broke. He lost 3 teeth and briefly forgot the alphabet. They buried the roasting tray in consecrated ground. And yet, every year, someone tries to gift it with sincerity. A token of my appreciation, they'll say, while sweat gathers at their temples. Thought you might enjoy this. No one ever does. But no one dares refuse it either. It's not about meat. It's about tradition, responsibility, shared suffering, a silent pact among kin. We don't eat the mutton, but we respect its journey. And so it continues, across parlors, down hallways, through fog and guilt and cold hands wrapped in knit gloves. You, for now, are free. But come next December, when a mysterious bundle appears on your windowsill wrapped in tartan and trauma, you'll know the mutton has returned. So tonight, as you lie warm in your bed, your real bed, with a mattress that doesn't crunch, sheets that weren't shared with livestock, and a thermostat that isn't just a fire you have to keep emotionally invested in, maybe whisper a quiet thank you to your Victorian ancestors, because they welcomed the new year with nothing but a bucket of curdled egg liquor. 17 unresolved superstitions, and the looming dread of January rent. They faced it all with scratchy wool, second-hand hopes, and a communal sense of denial so powerful it probably kept the frostbite at bay. No fireworks, no countdown, just church bells, pickled things, and Harold falling asleep in the stew pot again. They danced in parlors until someone put a foot through the floor. They sang songs no one remembered the lyrics to. And they kissed each other with breath that could knock over a modest-sized horse. And still, they showed up. They survived. They laughed. They told stories. They clung to hope, even if it was fermented and slightly poisonous, because history isn't just wars and kings and crumbling empires. It's regular, ridiculous people doing their best not to die in a house with no windows during the most emotionally complex holiday of the year. So rest easy, time traveler. Your ancestors made it through lice, typhus, and flaming puddings, and now you get central heating, filtered water, and the ability to Google, is this rash normal? History may be brutal, but it's also a reminder. People are hilariously stubborn, endlessly hopeful, and somehow always just a little bit drunk. Sleep well. You're not in Victorian England anymore, and even if you were, you'd probably be moored. Good night.